Om Ganana Am Tva Ganapati Kum Havamahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jesharajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspat Anashanvan Notibisi Sadanam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha.
Om Bhurvasva Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonah Prachodayat. Namaste everyone. So this is the first episode of YTF Samvadah, and there have been few episodes which we have launched through Samvadah, but uh, this particular episode, which will be titled as Elements of Conversation, will be launched as YTF Samvadah. So first I'd like to introduce what exactly Samvadah is. And we can simply say that this is a very informal way of conversation, and uh, this is different from all the usual conventional way of formal conversations and official conversations that we have, which are debates or several speeches or articles or several such things. What we aim to do through Samvada is to build on a conversation. Like when you are debating, you are just trying to prove your point, and that is good in some aspects, but again building up knowledge is another thing. And since conversations have been a very important part of Bharatiya culture, and thus we would like to take this forward uh, with YTF as well. So I'd like Prashant to introduce the topic.
Well, thank you, Viduleka. I'm very excited that this is our first official one under YTF. And the previous ones that we've recorded as relevant, we'll also start posting those under YTF as well. So this is great. And so what I really wanted to start off this series with is introducing what are the different types of dialogue we have. Because anytime we have a conversation, whichever format of conversation it is, you're relating to another human being. And it's very important to know how exactly to do that, how to resonate with somebody else, how to sympathize with their position, how to establish your position firmly, while at the same time being compassionate in all your dealings. And so, traditionally speaking, when we talk about the four types of dialogues, they are divided into the following categories. So, first is something we call Vitanda. So, the Vitanda means I have a certain position, and you have a position which is a different one from mine. So, if my position is position X, yours is position Y. Suppose you take a position X, I'll end up taking a position Z. So basically, my goal is not to really speak with you. I have a personal grudge against you. I have some problem with you, and therefore, whatever your position is, I will disagree. Even if you end up agreeing with me, I'll end up disagreeing with you by taking up a different one. So this is what you call Vitanda, and it's obviously not a very good place to start.
Right.
Now, the second type of conversation we have is called Jalpai.
Hmm.
This happens a lot more often than we think. While in the case of Vitanda, it was very obvious that this is a silly form of dialogue.
Right.
Many of the things that we encourage in the name of debate ends up being Jalpa. So Jalpa means you have a certain position, you enter the discussion, I have a different position. And we have made up our minds right from the beginning to not
Hmm.
alter our perspectives. I am going to define my position like a fanatic. You're going to defend your position like a fanatic. And at the end of the day, there will be no exchange of ideas. We are
Hmm.
only out to bolster our own perspective, not to understand the other person's perspective. And this is a very common factor in debates. And this is also to be avoided.
Right.
So the third kind of conversation that we actually have is called Vada. Vada is between friends where you're having a general chit chat. So in this kind of a conversation, yes, there is some exchange of knowledge, but it may not be at a particularly high level as well.
Hmm.
You go out with your friends, you drink some coffee, you have some gupshup. That would also classify under Vada, which is good. There's nothing wrong in this.
Hmm.
The fourth one is a Samvada, which
Hmm.
can be categorized into two types. So the first one is actually between a teacher and a student, where there's a one-way flow of knowledge. And the second one is actually a very high level of conversation where two people are learning from each other and they are going very deep within the process of articulation. And so I would classify our conversation as the latter type, which is that we are learning from each other, but we are also
Right.
exploring very deeply.
Hmm.
We have an occasion to also chit chat, which we do very often. But as part of this conversation series, we're going to try to keep the level of conversation, the quality as high as possible, so that we get the most bang for the buck from each other.
Hmm.
And as the audience is eavesdropping on us conversing, they will also get something profound out of it. So these are 4 categories of conversations. And if you have any comments on
Yes, that's making me think how I have personally evolved from the first type of conversations to now learning how to go into Samvadah. Because the Vitanda thing, I I used to be, although it is not a good kind of conversation, I used to be very good in it. I still am, but I don't like that, in simple words. And slowly coming from that to uh, Samvada is a good kind of evolution, because uh, I can sense how this kind of conversation makes you happy, while the Vitanda thing, that may boost up your ego, but at the end you feel drained.
right.
So we have discussed this so many times, and now that you are explaining how it goes academically and traditionally, I can understand why we have been feeling in certain ways while doing certain kind of conversations.
And you know what, as you very rightly pointed out, part of this dialogue is that we interrelate different subject areas together.
Right.
So what you said about this thing, okay, you have the capacity because you've
Hmm.
been through Vitanda just as I have, you've been through Jalpai as I have, and you start seeing the value in Samvada. It's a
Hmm.
little bit like martial arts, isn't it? That you are taught how to fight and you know how to defend yourself, but the
Exactly.
martial artist is the one who actually is the most peaceful of them,
Hmm.
because that martial artist has practiced restraint and
Hmm.
knows when to keep the weapons in check, but knows also when to remove them. And so
Exactly.
that makes the position very powerful, that you've been through certain experiences and then you're able to hold yourself back as well. And so that's very well pointed out. So there's one
And
sorry, go ahead.
okay. And one more point I like to put in, like in Bharat, every act we do has to be related to some result. We have a hetu for everything. We take a sankalp before doing any of the tasks. Even if even if I am chilling out for 1 hour, that has to do something with a final goal, that if I chill out for 1 hour, maybe I will be able to do my task more efficiently, and thus this is required. Similarly, I realized over time that if I'm debating on social media randomly, then okay, it may feel good, but it's it has no output. And we had a discussion with YTF uh, members few days ago, that what exactly is the should be the aim while debating on social media, because sometimes it becomes necessary. Then one of the senior members of YTF, Amitabh ji, he said that while you are debating on social media, it is not about the opponent, because that person already has taken a stance. It is about the people reading it. So they are going through a certain logics and rebuttals, and they understand that okay, they don't have any compulsion to agree to any. They have a free will to choose it. So at that place, it may be all right, but most of the times it is useless,
Yes,
because nobody is going to get anything out of it.
true.
So at that place, I think, again, I'm not saying that it is unnecessary all the time. Sometimes it is required, and sometimes it is very necessary. Uh, but most of the times, we don't need to do that.
Hmm.
We need to build upon a certain thought process. And I think if any person is honest and truly wants to learn anything, then Samvada is the best way to do it. Means if I want to debate with even a person who has completely opposite ideologies as of mine, that person has come to that conclusion because of certain reasons. Or maybe there are no reasons. That person has accepted that because everyone else around them have been accepting that. But if that person is honest, and if I am honest with the conversation, we should aim to uh, reach to a point where we can understand that what exactly is right. I may be wrong, the other person may be wrong, or maybe our knowledge is incomplete, but being honest is what matters.
True. That's very true. Um, and so this thing about honesty brings us to the point of ideological possession, something that we've privately spoken about, which is that in most instances, when two people are having a conversation, two or more people, uh, you know, uh, we are supposed to be the carrier of ideas, but here the idea ends up carrying away the person. So that
Right.
means that, and this is the case of any ism when you speak about, right? So
Hmm.
let's say if I take capitalism
Hmm.
or if I take socialism, because this is something that we are familiar with and we've seen several debates and arguments on these
Hmm.
topics. What ends up happening is that you have a certain system, there's an ism attached with it, and
Hmm.
therefore you inherit all the pros as well as the cons of that system. And now,
Right.
if you become a spokesperson for that model, you are also forced to defend the problems because now
Exactly.
you're defending only one position. And so
Hmm.
this is what you call like ideological possession, where you're possessed by the idea, but you're not able
Hmm.
to think independently anymore.
Hmm.
Whereas this we'll get into even more detail about like what makes our conversations different. And
Hmm.
so one thing that I wanted to also talk about, this whole thing about memes and viruses. So every single ideology is actually a meme of sorts. So today I think most people, when they think about memes, they are familiar with these images that you post on the internet. Funny, it makes you laugh. I'm sorry, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. This is a informal, on a lighter note, input that I
Mhm.
recently discovered that most of the memes have the font impact. You know the font impact
Yes,
on it.
that's funny.
So we will discuss about that later. Continue
Right.
with it.
No, and it's actually true because it's almost appropriate because
Right?
memes have a lot of impact.
Yes.
So the font name is fine, and the reason it has so much impact is because the meme is a package of ideas put together in a compressed form that ends up being circulated by human vectors. It's kind
Hmm.
of like how malaria spreads or how any virus spreads. It's human vectors. And so
Hmm.
memes are like idea vectors or idea viruses which spread through
Hmm.
human vectors. And the reason I'm bringing up this meme thing is because any ism is ultimately a meme because it is packaged in a certain name, in a certain form,
Right.
and people run away with it. And so, a good mark of any conversation, I believe, of any person, as you said, trying to be honest, is that they don't subscribe entirely to an ism, but they keep themselves open enough to recognize the flaws of their own respective positions. And they may say that, okay, I agree like 60% with this idea and 40% I disagree, but they should be honest enough to like bring that out.
Hmm. And that's making me think that some people here may argue that while the part of implementation is required to be thought upon, um, you have to work with certain cons. But what I say here is it's all right if you do that, but you should do that consciously. That you should know that this is the con, but because of the implementation uh, constraints, you have to do it. So that's again the part of honesty, that you're honest that this is a con and I have to do it, and I again know what will be the results out of it. But there are certain constraints, but that doesn't happen often. People just people somehow don't want to think. They think up to a certain level and then they get stuck that okay, this is the end. Well, there's never an end to ideas and thinking and trying to improve it. The humans have been doing it, or say the nature have been doing it since millions of years, and we are still evolving, and we don't know how humans will be after several thousand years.
Right.
So
So this is
it's
what
never
you'll
ending.
call continuous improvement in engineering terms. It's
Yes,
all about process improvement, and we never have to
exactly.
stop because the moment we become comfortable, okay, chalo, a system that has come out 150, 125 years ago, it
Hmm.
will of course have to be updated to suit our present needs,
Hmm.
and so that the update statement has to be introduced into all of our dealings. That we have to figure
Hmm.
out what's relevant in today's day and time,
Right.
and that's one of the things. So how do we avoid falling into the trap of isms? And the
Hmm.
solution is very simple actually. It is we have to take a paksha, because nature abhors a vacuum. Like you cannot, some people say, oh, I'm a very neutral person. That is
Hmm.
not true. There's no
Right.
such thing as a neutral person. There's no, even the fact that I'm neutral is a paksha at the end of the day. The paksha that we have to take is dharma, because
Hmm.
what dharma does is it considers this desh, kal, vastu, parasthiti. So what are the considerations based on place, time, and situation? and what is the right action to take, what is the right system to adopt, what is the right move, right decision, all of these things. So the way I think about it is, let's say if you take in all the input parameters, and you want to, if you think of an axis, x and y axis,
Hmm.
the maximum area under that curve is
Hmm.
the maximum good you can produce. And what dharma
Right.
does is it basically takes in all the variables and optimizes such that the area is maximized. And so maybe it could be like 80%, just as an example, like 80% capitalism is good, and then maybe 20% socialism is good, and this. And then we'll see how does the area get maximized.
Exactly.
And so in every single one of our dealings, like if we are able to use that maximal good axiom that dharma presents
Hmm.
to us, then we'll not be under the sway of ideas, but rather we will be happily able to adopt and accept ideas and then use them to our advantage. So it's very important that human beings don't get used by ideas, but rather we make use of ideas.
Hmm. And that's a very nice way that you have related it, because the past episode of Samvadah, which will be one of the future episodes of YT of Samvadah, in which we talked about dharma, we have focused on this point that how dharma is about maximizing the good with respect to people and with respect to time. And yes, that's the perfect way to do it. Like, it's not about taking sides with ideology. It is about taking sides with dharma, and whatever does the maximum good in a particular situation should be done. And that makes me think that, a person may agree with your ideology, but still you and I have conflicts so many times, again because of the same thing, because their ideology may be right, it can be ideal again, but it may not be ideal in a given circumstance. So I think so many people need to learn this, that okay, taking stance is a good thing, but it is a good thing when you are doing it consciously.
Right,
And the same thing, they are not in an ideological possession.
right. And speaking of ideas, one of my teacher, Swami Dayandaji, what he mentioned is some of the most dangerous people are ideologues, because every
Okay.
time somebody had a bad idea, that's what made that person dangerous, because he or she believed it like a zealot.
Hmm.
Very like Hitler had an idea about
Hmm.
social and racial purity, and Stalin had an idea, and Mao had an idea, and all of these people who had ideas, and they were really bad ideas, were the ones who were creating the most chaos on earth. Whereas people who don't have
Right.
ideas are harmless. They're like, they may not do much in their life, but at least they can't create capacity for harm. And so
Hmm.
the reason ideologues are so dangerous is because they are not mercenaries. You cannot buy their silence. You cannot,
Hmm.
bribe them to shut up. They actually
Hmm.
truly believe in these things with a desperation.
Hmm.
And so, when it comes to ideas, again, because we are in the world of ideas, we have to fight one bad idea with a good idea. And that also becomes a very great responsibility upon our shoulders, because this is something I've recently spoken about on social media as well, that many times people say, oh, that person is saying something, usko bolne de, usko ignore kar, the problem will go away. And problems never go away unless you have dialogue. And
Right.
sometimes part of the dialogue includes criticizing somebody else, because
Hmm.
if something incorrect is being done, to speak out, to voice it out, is also samvada, because there's something good that's coming out of it. And so yeah, that is another thing. So what I'd like to actually get
Hmm.
into is, what are the fundamentals of a good dialogue? And, I'll basically list out a couple
Hmm.
of points, and then, you can give me your feedback on each of these, what you think.
Uh, Before this, I like to put in a few points.
Yes.
First of all, as you said, ideas versus good ideas, I like to restate it as better ideas versus worse ideas.
Hmm.
And since we are talking about an ideological position, I like to put in an example. So once I was reading about this criminal psychology thing, and the examples were from the rapists, the criminals, and the murderers, all those people. And the psychologist wrote an article about how these people truly believed that what they did was right. If they murdered someone, they truly believed that okay, this murder was right, and that's why they did it. And that made me realize that how people, like, I do something because I know that it is right, and even if just in case I know that this is wrong. Besides those boundaries of it being wrong, I still believe that it's right. It's right to do wrong, and that's why I'm doing it. And that's where the ideological possession thing comes to like its extremity. And I think people can relate to this better than relating to the example of Mao, because when some few things become so common, people can't relate to it much.
Right.
But now the same thing, a person can murder one person, and people like Mao or Lenin can murder millions. So
And
that's how
some
an
religions as
idea
well.
works. Yes. So that's how the scale may vary, but at its core, it's the same thing. It is being possessed by.
Right. And if you even relate this to a wider scale in terms of religion,
Hmm.
I suppose we can afford to be controversial as long as it's factual. And the facts are that
Right.
every founder of a religious ideology was an ideologue. They had
Right.
an idea that they wanted to defend like zealots, and
Hmm.
there was a lot of mass murder, mayhem, violence that was created in the wake of the founding of those theologies. And
Right.
that's why one thing that many people often wonder, like especially if you speak to foreigners, it's like, oh,
Hmm.
who founded Sanatana Dharma? It's like there's no founder.
Right.
We've had a very long standing tradition. Nobody can tell you how far back it dates. There's no
Hmm.
historicity associated with it. Whereas every other religion which has a certain founder had an ideology associated with it, and that's what created so much unrest and problem in whatever society it is that they took over.
Hmm.
If we look at even the dharmic expansion, like it's not that our Hindu kings were pacifists. They expanded their kingdoms. Today when I visited Singapore, it's
Hmm.
actually called Singapore. Then their national
Yes.
anthem is, it's like Singapore, Singapore. Like, they actually sing it that way.
Hmm.
And you'll see these emblems if you go to Thailand, you go to Cambodia, all of these places. Like it's the same civilization has been maintained, the
Right.
dharmic civilization, but it has been layered on top with their oriental characteristics also. So it's a very
Hmm.
beautiful blend, especially if you see like Balinese Hinduism. It's very
Hmm.
colorful. So, like the way a dharmic teaching spreads is by incorporating the best of ideals even in the existing society where it has spread. Whereas the
Hmm.
way the ideological possessed religion spread is through conflict and chaos. And that's
Right.
why there is no trace left of the native civilization in a place where these ideologies have spread. Because if you go to Egypt today, there's no trace of the old Egyptians. All that is there are the standing pyramids that people can't
Right.
even translate the hieroglyphs anymore. We've
Hmm.
completely lost the religion altogether. So it's a very dangerous thing. The next point I actually want to just list out are like, okay, what are some things that make a dialogue productive? Like, what are some things to keep in mind,
Hmm.
especially for newcomers who are looking to do something similar to what we're doing, right? So the
Hmm.
first thing is that have a goal in mind.
Hmm.
Why exactly are we here? Second is that ultimately you have to create partnerships with the people that you speak to. So the point being that we are working towards a common goal. Nobody is trying to take the spotlight from each other,
Hmm. Hmm.
and what you're trying to basically pursue is there's some truth pursuit over here. That's the goal, as you said, that as long as you're honest and you're sincere in your approach, it becomes very fruitful. Then of
Hmm.
course it's important to keep a friendly rapport with each other. um, One has to listen, because listening is as important as speaking. And sometimes, especially like when there's a when you have an introvert and extrovert come together, it ends up being dominated by one or the other. So one has to be very
Right.
respectful of that. And sometimes it may be one's natural inclination to speak more, but then in that case you have to cut back,
Right.
and which is what I'm trying to do.
Which
And
both of us often try to do.
right. And here's something very important. Be factual, and when you're citing an opinion, say that it's an opinion, not a fact, because that will avoid
Right.
misunderstandings with somebody else, especially when it's a debate forum.
Right.
And assume good intention on part of the person you're speaking to.
Hmm.
So I don't want to take names, but there are examples where let's say if you disagree with someone, you end
Hmm.
up being called an RSS agent or an BJP IT cell person, right? These things are
Right.
not necessary. Like, assume that the other person is here for the same reason that you are here,
Hmm.
and don't get into this whole name calling business. And of course, sometimes things can get nasty. In that case, it's best to walk away, but don't make noise about it on social media. And another important thing is, suppose there's an audience, be considerate of the audience's expectations. It could be language expectations. It could be their qualifications in terms of whether they are beginners in understanding the subject matter, how much you need to tone down your conversation, things like that.
Hmm.
So this is what just some basic elements that make a good dialogue. What are your thoughts?
uh, no, this is actually making me think that how people teach about good conversations to us in academics, like in engineering first semester we had a subject called communication skills, and they used to teach us ye bolna chahiye, wo bolna chahiye, several things ki, you should not assume that people know things, and there were several things. And now I'm thinking that people ignore those basic academic points as well while doing the basic conversation, and about the name calling thing, and about making fun of the other person. It sounds so bad. Like, you lose that means, even if you have started a conversation honestly, you lose the willingness to do it when the other person starts doing this, because then you realize that, okay, the next person is not being honest, that person doesn't want to uh, go into a conversation, that person just wants to prove themselves. So that's not a good kind of thing. And now means, rarely I don't, but most of the times I completely avoid such conversations, because it is not going to take me anywhere.
Right.
It's just going to drain my energy, that's it. And it's whatever I do, it's not going to change the stance of the other person. And I think that ideally the goal of any kind of debate or speech or article should be the same, right? Means it was designed to build up on a idea or on a knowledge, but over time it has not remained that.
Right.
Over time it has become about uh, expressing your own thoughts, and that's it. That's at that point people just stop it.
And about
Well,
winning.
yes, it has become about winning. And since we had discussed before as well that we have been good at debating,
Right.
and we stopped doing that because it, although we were good at it, we were not actually enjoying it. It may give us satisfaction for a few seconds that, okay, we won the debate, but that's it. While this Samvadah thing and constructive conversations, we have learned a lot of things.
Mhm.
and and basically that's why we plan to do it through YTF as well, because
Mhm.
again YTF is, it's not a platform to defend any ideology. It's about building up the knowledge, and that's why Samvada is a perfect what I'll say representation of what we want to do with YTF.
Actually, I like what you said. It's also a portal because it's a portal into the world of truth, and we are jumping through it. And
Yeah.
reminds you of a different portal, but okay. So so this is a very good point you brought about, like the debate. So how do you change somebody's mind in a debate? And so I'll offer a couple of points, and then we can discuss your thoughts on that. So the
Hmm.
first thing is that be a good participant. Show the behavior that you want others to show. So if you don't want somebody else to be combative, to be reactionary, then that is the kind of behavior that we should also establish from our own end. That okay, we've
Hmm.
approached this in good faith. We
Hmm.
are, engaging in a friendly conversation. Yes, I'm here to defend my position, as are you, but I will do
Hmm.
it in a manner which is respectful of your approach as well. The
Hmm.
second thing is don't give loose definitions. So I, especially with somebody who has a background in say science or adhyatma, this annoys the hell out of me. Like sometimes people
Right.
say ki, oh, this person is giving out positive energy, that person's giving negative energy. I'm like, can energy be negative? So today we spoke about the potential gradient which can be negative, but like if
Hmm.
you really speak in scientific terms, that doesn't make sense. And so like
Right.
I'm just giving an adhyatmic example that I really try to tell the people I converse with on the level of adhyatma that be as precise as you can with definitions, because
Hmm.
if you enter a debate, you are going to get caught out of on that point. And second is, if you're trying to teach somebody something, it's going to confuse the other
Hmm.
person. So use points as precisely as possible, and be very clear with definitions and demarcate a fact from an opinion. Because if it's an opinion, it is a very subjective thing, and then people can jump on it. So it's good to say, okay, this is my opinion. But if you know something to be true, then you can cite the sources. So those are 2 points. The other is ask questions, lots of questions, especially when you're trying to understand the other person's position. So let's say you may have said something, and it's quite likely I may have misunderstood you. So it is my duty to ask you to clarify until I understand it. So these clarifying questions are very good for me to be able to correctly assess your situation position. Um, Sometimes when in doubt, restate your own understanding of the other person's position. I can be like, okay, here's what I understand you said. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And so restate that other person's position. Now, this is also very important. Point out extremes from every side. That means that I'm just giving an example. Let's suppose I am representing ISKCON, for instance, and you are representing Arya Samaj or something like that. Okay, I'm not from ISKCON, but if I was, then it is my duty to point out that there are certain problems within my tradition, and it is your duty to point out there are certain problems within your tradition. Like Arya Samaji, like I would say that I have a problem with Arya Samajis in terms of their Murti Puja stance. And then you might have a problem with these ISKCON people, suppose, saying that, okay, I think they are a bit too biblical in their zealotry to promote the teachings. So that way, if I come from a certain position and I belong to that position because I see it to be mostly right, I should also be honest enough to say that yes, but there are a few flaws. I should not be defending the flaws of my position. I should openly say that these are wrong things. That's the only way that growth and trust can be built. Because you can only trust a person when they are open to admitting some problems. And then instead of blaming, try to find solutions. And both people should be equal participants in finding the solution. That should be the common denominator of the discussion. That means that a good example is again the socialism capitalism thing. The solution here is how do we improve the economy of Bharat? If you're talking about the economic aspect of it, then both sides will say, okay, these are certain principles that we can apply from capitalism, from socialism, whatever. So that way, when you're solution oriented, then you are again stepping away from ideologies. You are into the solution mode. And then somewhere they can both agree that, okay, you know what, maybe we can reach a compromise because I should share for the people who haven't heard you. You moderated or you hosted that session. And I think your closing remarks were very powerful, which I completely agree with. You said that, okay, at the end of the day, these are two extreme systems. And when we are talking about the economy or when we are talking about the country, there has to be some give and take from both sides, and you have to meet somewhere. Now, that somewhere may not always be at the middle. In fact, almost always, it is never in the middle. It's always some skew left or right. And people have to be open and sincere enough to arrive at that focal point. That's 80%, 30%, whatever. And finally, not finally, but two more things. So ask for a pramana always. And this, for our viewers, they may be exposed to this in the next one. But what I really mean by a pramana is ask for a means of knowledge. How do you know what you know? Suppose you're citing a fact, give me the sources. What are your references? If it's an opinion, tell me it's an opinion. If it's a fact, show it to me. So that pramana buddhi is very important here as well. And ultimately, learn from personal mistakes. Because in every dialogue, I may say certain things which may be wrong. But one has to, at least in the corporate world, there's something called the parking lot. Where, let's say, if you don't know something, if you said something incorrect, next time when you have a meeting, you'll pull out these items from the parking lot saying that, oh, I need to correct my position from what I said last time because this was incorrect. It's very important to do that. And lastly, don't ruin friendships, because debate can make a situation very sour between two people. And it is always important to remember that you're speaking to a person, you're not speaking to an idea.
Right. So I'll go back to the point of definition thing. Because understanding what definition is has made my life so much easier in academics and out of academics. So I'll state once what happened that we were in 10th class and our principal, he used to be I won't state anything about his uh, personal details, but academically he used to be very good. And what he did was he wanted us students to be sure about whatever we are speaking. And thus he always used to focus on definitions and concepts. So once he came to our class and he asked simple question. The class was of geometry and we were in class 10th, so all of us knew what circles are. But then he asked define circle, and we spent so much time on it. Like it was 2-3 hours, and we learned so much in those 2-3 hours that the definition cannot be a cyclic definition. Like you are defining A with respect to B, then you have to define B with respect to A. So that's not a good thing. And thus we came. Okay, this can be an open question to the audience as well. Pause this video and think about the definition of circle.
I like how
And
you did
I'm
that.
so sure. What?
I like that idea. Pause the video.
Yes, pause the video and think about it. That what is the definition of circle, and take your time. And I'm so sure that 80 to 90% of the audience won't get it right at once.
Can I try?
Sure. Please do.
Okay. The circle would be all the points that are equidistant from the center. Something like that.
What is center?
Okay. Good. Because this would become
That's
circular.
a cyclic. That's
Right,
a
right.
cyclic definition.
How would you define it?
All combination of all the points which are equidistant from a single defined point.
Ooh, very nice.
Yes. So point has an independent definition.
Right.
Point is an entity which has no dimensions. It has just one location.
Wonderful.
So you can define one thing with respect to something else which has an independent definition, but that cannot be a cyclic definition. As you said, center. So center is of the circle. You define center with respect to the circle. So you cannot define circle with respect to the center.
Brilliant.
So that's the thing about definitions. And while defining something, people should be clear about it. They are not allowed to make cyclic definitions. They are not allowed to put in opinions there. And this is not only about definitions. It is about so many things. As you said about opinions. Most of the times I see opinions are ill-informed. So many times people quote, this is scientific and this is not scientific. How do we define scientific?
Right.
Because in modern science, people talk about medicine. In modern medicine, most of the things are being proved statistically. And the statistical proof is not a complete proof. It is about there's a 90% chance in this and this assumption and this defined circumstance that this is going to happen. So you have certain assumptions, you have certain circumstances, you have certain artificial environmental conditions, and in that as well, there is not 100% chance. There is 90%, 95%, 98% chance that this is going to happen. Then after that, we have few empirical formulas in which we say that, okay, if this is less than 0.05, if it is less than 5%, then it is not, what do you say it?
Statistically significant?
Yes, significant. It is not significant. So that's how you do it. And when people start talking about it as a proof, then it is a disappointment, especially when the people who are themselves involved in science do it.
Right.
So people should know what they are talking about. Just take a moment and think about it. When people talk about Hinduism, when they talk about Adhyatma, either they can honestly say that this is their opinion based on whatever they have learned till now, or else just don't say. But don't say that, okay, this is Hinduism. And this is capitalism.
Or the best thing is that just say, I don't know, but I'll get back to you. That's very powerful.
Right. That's very powerful, and that seems so good. And again, I'll go back to the examples from my school. So there used to be few teachers, when I asked a certain question, they didn't know it and they gave stupid answers. Just in case I knew the answer after a few days, they just discarded the answers. But there were few teachers who used to pause. They used to think. If they didn't know it, they would say that, okay, I don't know it, and I'll go back and I'll come back to you. Because of course, it is not possible for anyone to know everything. And being a teacher, that was a very, very good thing. And I still remember and respect those teachers. That means I won't say that it is a good trait. It is a normal trait. That's what a normal person is required to do. That doesn't make you Mahan. It's everyone should do that. But if you're not doing that, then there's something wrong with
And the normal has changed now. That's why it's become a Mahan thing.
it. Yeah.
No, these are brilliant points, especially on, I really like what you said about these definitions, because it's so acute for one to be uh, as clear as possible about what you're defining. And a definition cannot have ambiguity, and it cannot have more than one single possible outcome. Like a
Right.
definition is definitive; it has no vagueness to it. So that's very, very well said. Then certain other very obvious things, as you said.
Okay. That reminds me, I missed a point while defining circle.
Hmm.
All the points have to be in a single plane
Right.
because otherwise it will be a sphere.
So I have to think about that one, because maybe that's Euclidean, because you can still have a.
That's about you.
It depends on the geometry of space.
Yes.
And just to give some trivia, it took Einstein 9 years just to figure out non-Euclidean space. So
Yes. Not going into non-Euclidean because what we study in school is Euclidean geometry.
right. It reminds me of the joke that we spoke about. The useless obvious fact that all right angles are 90 degrees.
Okay, yes. That is that in some episode, or should we do it again?
It's not in an episode, so we should do it again for our audience.
So we were discussing that we hate listening to obvious facts, and there used to be like 5 axioms of Euclid. I'm not sure about the numbers, and one of it was that all right angles are equal. And that seems so obvious to me. That what is it about? Obviously, all the right angles are equal, and I used to make fun of it for so long. And afterwards, I stated this to my father that what is this? All right angles are equal. Everyone knows that. So he said that you think about it. Why is it called as right angle? So I had no answer. Then he replied that it is called right angle. Probably it was. I'm not sure whether he knows it or it was his opinion or has he derived it over time. I am not sure about that. But he said that it is called right angle because whenever anything hangs due to gravity, it's at right angle, and that's why it is called as right angle. And right angle defines 90 degree. 90 degree doesn't define right angle. So all right angles are 90 degree, and that's why all right angles are equal. They're not saying that all 90 degrees are equal. They are saying that all right angles are equal and they are 90 degrees. So it goes other way around.
Right. See, so many things we can relate.
Right.
So just again, this thing about basic civility, you said that it should be the norm, but unfortunately it's become the exception just based on the world we live in. Okay, it's more like, don't raise your voice. Don't speak when somebody else is speaking. If you do, like, excuse yourself, things like that, like basic courtesy, basic politeness. Don't use uncivil language. So this one is more common than one would think, right? It's
Right.
like when somebody is saying something you disagree with, don't laugh. It's not like you're not saying anything impolite, but sometimes people will laugh at the other person, even to themselves. They'll be like this. It's very
They
rude.
do it so often.
It's very irritating.
It is.
And there's something called a strawman argument, if you might be familiar with it, that don't create a strawman. That means if I have a certain position, don't distort my position to the weakest possible interpretation of it so that you can knock it down.
Right.
Instead, what we should actually do, instead of creating strawmen, is create a steelman. That means, and this is not a very common expression. This is something that's very recently come up, which is that I take your position and I make your position even better than you can make it before I knock it down. Like, I give you that much dignity, that much respect, that, okay, you know what, you haven't considered all the possibilities about your position. Your position is actually stronger than you think it is. And then you knock it down if you have to. But you turn it into a
Right.
steel man, not a straw man.
That's a very good point. I'll try to incorporate this particular rule.
I'm also trying that. Yeah. Because it is, like, frankly, it is tempting to knock somebody down. It's very tempting. But, that is a courtesy. And the next thing I wanted to really talk about, because this is covering more or less the rules of basic debate, like any normal person who's engaging should know. How
Hmm.
can you even exceed this? How can you become even better at it? And so, some thoughts that I had here is first of all, help your opponent.
Hmm.
This sounds like almost like a suicide mission, but it will make us stronger at the end of the day. Like if your opponent
Right.
is fumbling, come to their assistance. If they seem frustrated, like try to calm them down.
Hmm.
See, it is very easy to, like, when you see the other person losing their patience, our first temptation is okay, okay, let's poke them a little bit more till they get really irritated and say something very stupid, and then I'll win. But
Right.
the right thing to do, even though that other one is tempting, is that okay, try to get the other person to calm down in a way where you're not invading them too much.
Hmm.
If they seem too passive, encourage them to speak up.
Hmm.
Uh, um, if they are offended, like hold yourself back a little bit. Sometimes you may
Hmm.
have to reposition yourself or present something a little differently. And really, at the end of the day, be a better person. Bring out the best in your opponent. Because if you approach with that bhava of friendship, then every debate can be a very fruitful one. So,
Right.
this reminds me of our ancient acharyas, Adi Shankaracharya, if you look at it. He
Hmm.
used to go to people and they would wash each other's feet before a
Hmm.
debate. Like not their own feet, but each other's feet, and they would address each other as Bhagwan.
Hmm.
So that is such a polite way to look at it because automatically that mask falls off and you're no longer
Hmm.
interacting with the enemy, you're interacting with somebody that you have the deepest admiration for.
Hmm. And this whole time I've been thinking that all this is valid when the next person is honest. And why? What exactly should I do when it's not so? Should I just stop the conversation, or means I need you to answer that? I don't know. I'm confused
It's a
myself.
very very difficult question to answer because if your intention is to win, suppose, then the obvious thing is that I'm going to take advantage of that fact, right? That's the very
Hmm.
obvious thing. If your
Hmm.
intention is that, okay, regardless of the outcome, I have not come here to win, I have not come here to
Hmm.
put the other person down, I have not come here to
Hmm.
establish the superiority of myself or my ideology. I've come
Hmm.
here to debate in a dialectical format which is going to be beneficial to the audience, to myself, and to my opponent.
Hmm.
So in that case, what you would do is you would try to reposition the other person. Say that,
Hmm.
look, let's drop our guard and let's
Hmm.
converse as two human beings who are basically trying to help each other and try to understand. So what one should ideally try to do is get the other person to come down a few notches from their aggression. And in case that person refuses to do it, everybody has seen कौन क्या लाया stage पर. Right? The
Right.
audience knows your attempt. The audience has seen that other person's reaction also. And if
Hmm.
that barrage of onslaught continues on, then
Hmm.
you can leave. You can say that, look, I tried
Right.
my best. This is not going anywhere. It's a waste of our
Hmm.
time. It's a waste of the audience's time. And
Hmm.
we can carry on another day when you are in a better mood. It's a very fair thing to say. So, like in some sense, you have won the debate by doing that because you've become the better person. But at the same time, you've also shown the audience an example of what it means to interact plainly with another person
Hmm.
on respectful grounds. Um, Now, suppose the person relents and they are like, okay, chalo, what you say is sensible. Now you have a good
Hmm.
conversation, and
Hmm.
and that can continue. So even on that point, like I wanted to discuss one thing that we've spoken about personally. In fact, I called you right after I watched a certain debate, and a thought came in my head that when do debates work and when do they fail, and at what
Hmm.
point should we move away from the debate format?
Right.
Debates fail when we speak about complementary systems.
Hmm.
Because again, like if I'm representing 100% of a given position versus another,
Hmm.
and when the solution is actually a percentage of that position, not the 100%, then I cannot debate it. Because
Right.
the goal should be like finding an optimal point, not to establish superiority of a system.
Hmm.
So debates such as capitalism versus socialism or free market economy versus like regulated economy, all of these are very stupid debates, I would say, to be honest, because
Hmm.
it should be more of a discussion than a debate. Now, at what point then one might obviously ask that when should you have a debate? And the debates can only be had between two completely self-consistent systems because they are actually pakshas at odds with each other. They're not complementary. And so the thought that came in my head, the reason I thought along these lines is, first of all, I was very disenchanted after watching certain debates. And so then I figured that, look, in the past also, our Mahatmas have had debates with other
Hmm.
Mahatmas. What was
Hmm.
the basis of their debate? And then I realized that they were debating ideologically consistent systems. And
Hmm.
so, say a debate between Sanatana Dharma and Islam is very legitimate
Hmm.
because there is no 50% in there. It's either this
Hmm.
or it's either that. So
Hmm.
debates are helpful when you are speaking of binaries or when you're speaking of like consistent systems.
Hmm. So yes, that's a very good point about the topics which are complementary, and that's making me think that this is why I used to win debates. Because the debates used to be like whether television is a boon or a bane. So I know the pros and cons of both the sides, and whichever side I may take, I may focus on the pros and destroy the opponent completely because I know their cons. The other person may or may not know that. So this is exactly the reason why I used to win the debates, because I, I can debate from both the directions, and I say that more often. But now it has become more clear that why is it so, because we are talking about complementary systems. We have to reach somewhere in between, and since the other person may not be very maybe as knowledgeable about the system as I am most of the times, or maybe as their reasoning may be slightly lower than mine. That's why I can win the debates. There's nothing other than that. And while I say this, I must say that I don't feel much pride in doing that. I don't feel much pride in winning the debates because I think of it as it being obvious. And now as you have said this, I know why. Why is it obvious? Why does it seem obvious to me?
True, that's very true. And so, out of now what we can discuss is of these three formats. Let's say what are the certain pros and cons of debate?
Hmm.
What is the pro and con of a panel, and what is the pro
Hmm.
and con, and what exactly are we doing, and why are we picking our format?
Hmm.
So debates, they have certain use, as you mentioned, and the use of a debate is that it is very, when we went to school, you had these comparison charts.
Hmm.
Instead of like a question and answer or explanation, you have like, okay, here is a unicellular being versus multicellular, and then you have these comparison charts in
Right.
between.
Hmm.
Somehow when you contrast two different things together, it
Hmm.
both become clearer to you.
Yes.
So a debate
Right.
is very good for you to be able to categorize ideas in your head when you look at it in terms of contrasting situations.
Right.
Whereas if it was just a long essay, it might even get boring, whereas debate keeps things a little lively and spunky. But one has
Hmm.
to recognize that what is an appropriate topic for debate. Now, the problem about debate, usually, I would say, I'm being generous also, maybe, but I would say 80% plus debates, it's more like 95, 98. But most debates are Jalpa.
Hmm.
Okay, I come in, I have a position, you come in, you have a position, we leave and
Hmm.
we retain our positions. I'm not going to
Hmm.
be enriched by you, and you're not going to be enriched by me.
Hmm.
So most people are not enriched by debate, and I completely agree with what you said that even when I still sometimes engage in a debate, it is
Hmm.
not for the sake of debating anymore. It is for the sake of the audience. If
Hmm.
somebody says something that is wrong, as you said, like replace a worse idea with a better one,
Hmm.
then I almost see it as my duty to go in, pitch the good idea, and then get out. But like, don't stay back and get dirty in the mud. Let the
Hmm.
audience make their own decision. So in such cases, debates are an effective tool for the audience if the format and if the interplay is appropriate.
Hmm.
But it fails for the most part because of Jalpai. Now, what about panel? Sorry,
Uh,
go ahead.
wait. Yes.
Hmm.
So here I want to means I'm thinking that instead of thinking it as of debate, as we have been thinking about it till now, we should think of it as a jalpa, and the outcome or the goal of which should be improve the understanding of both the sides. Because saying that jalpa in itself is not very good is almost correct. But if if the goal of understanding both the sides in a better way is being fulfilled, then isn't it a good thing? Means taking again the example of socialism versus capitalism, uh, I may not be as knowledgeable about it, but if I'm watching a nice debate, it has to be a nice debate. Both the sides should be equally efficient. If I'm watching the nice debate, and there has to be no winner, of course. It should be just the debate. If I'm watching it, then I get to learn so many things about both the sides, and then I'll be free to take either sides or maybe be somewhere in between and decide what is right according to me. So even if we are doing debates in the while considering it as Jalpa, we should have this particular kind of goal.
Right. So just one slight definition change over here. The debate is not being defined as a Jalpa. The debate can be promoted to the level of Samvadah also, potentially. So
Okay.
Jalpa basically means that my position will not change. That is the definition of Jalpa. It's like,
Right.
and so the debate has to be elevated outside of the purview of Jalpa into something like Vada or Samvada or whatever. And so those are qualities of conversation more than types of conversation.
What I am saying is, let's keep the debate in the level of Jalpa. Let's
Acha,
keep it there.
acha, acha.
And even if it is there, we can do something out of it. That's what
Right,
I'm saying.
right, true. That's true. I see now. And so then when you think about a panel discussion, like again, what are some of the pros and cons you think? So I think that a panel discussion is very good for getting out a multiplicity of viewpoints. Like you get many, many, many different viewpoints. And I really enjoyed the one you moderated, the one on psychology. Right. And so, we got to see like 4 different speakers, and each of them brought something very different and unique to the conversation. And so that is one advantage of panel discussion. One of the disadvantages is, again, because you have like multiple speakers, it's difficult to know, it's difficult for them to address each other. So again, they are speaking in generalities. They're not speaking to, say, a given individual. And so that depth of conversation cannot fully manifest in terms of like the interpersonal growth of those involved, because they've come to say what they have to say. And
Right.
it is a different type of enrichment where you get a multiplicity of viewpoints. And so what are your thoughts on that?
Okay. Everything makes me think in some other direction. So again,
That's good.
so again, what I'm thinking is a conversation which is meant for an audience and a conversation which is meant for just the conversation. Both are drastically different. We don't keep it in a drastically different situations, but they actually are. Because suppose there is a panel discussion and there's no audience, then there will be no formality involved, and they will just keep on building onto each other's thought processes and ideas. But when there's an audience involved, they are means they may not do it, but they are supposed to put in their own thoughts. That's what the audience have been expecting since a very long time. Means that is the trend. So since we here are 2 people, we do the Samvadah thing, and it takes 1.5 hours approximately most of the time. But think of it just in a case of, even take it to 3 people. It will be 1.5 into 3 hours minimum. So that cannot be in the front of an audience because there are time constraints. So I think that we had few roundtable discussions in YTF as well. I have not been a part of it, but we have done few of them. So what I am thinking is we should increase the frequency of those roundtable discussions in between ourselves, or maybe not let the audience be the whole means do it through the whole YouTube live thing.
Exactly.
And just 2 or 3 people should sit and reach upon and conclude and a conclusion, and then we can put it forward as an article or as a research or something like that.
Right.
That will be good.
or the audience can be sort of in the background, not in the foreground. And
Yes.
not so much in a disrespectful way, of course, because we respect the audience, but it's more like
Hmm.
we can only be fully ourselves when we are not distracted by the fact that we are trying to arrive at a low or common denominator. And then we
Hmm.
are only addressing each other's ideas and we are kind of like building on top of those. So
Hmm.
the thing I would still say is like, say, a panel discussion of like three or more people. Again, it's there are elements of chaos theory which go into it, right? Because it becomes a non-predictive system. And when
Hmm.
two people are bouncing ideas of each other, it is very obvious who's being addressed. But like, let's say
Hmm.
you say one thing, I say a different thing, and a third or a fourth person says something else. There are too many crossovers and too many nodes to kind of like work with. And so there, the channeling of ideas and the vertical growth, I'm not saying the horizontal spread, but the vertical depth, that becomes very difficult to navigate. And so what you will end up getting in panel discussions, I would say, are you'll get more ideas, but you'll not
Hmm.
be able to go to a deeper exploration of any one given idea,
Hmm.
because again, that would involve a common denominator
Hmm.
plus the talking over each other thingy plus
Hmm.
the time constraint.
Hmm.
So like those are like some of the pros and cons. And so like I think that's a very useful discussion to have, the panel
Hmm.
discussion, because that's when the maximum ideas can come out, and then somebody can take some ideas from there and then go deep into it through a samvada or whatever, one on one.
Right. And since we have YTF talks as well, I'm thinking that we should take this whole discussion into implementation in YTF as well.
We should do a workshop on this, elements of dialogue, full workshop.
Yes, because it will make us also means it should be systematic, right? Like we did some debates,
Mhm.
we did some panel discussions, we regularly have some talks. Now we are going into the samvada. I think we should make it more systematic. Like last time we had one panel discussion about the psychology, uh, about how the mental health issues of youth of Bharat. There were few common points, and I think we should take those points and invite something for a talk, like YTF talk, to push it into a vertical direction, and that will be nice, right?
Right.
So we should make it systematic like that.
I would almost say that your point is very right. I completely agree. But that vertical direction, I still feel it requires two people. Because two people, again, see, like when two people are speaking, the time constraint is not that bad.
Hmm.
Within 1.5 hours, we still have 45 minutes each. And usually a
Hmm.
talk lasts for an hour, right? So we are only 15 minutes short of our total talk time as individuals.
Hmm.
Plus, like you might have seen that there's so many fantastic points you brought out and you
Hmm.
enhanced my perspectives, and then I was able to do the same. And the
Hmm.
depth which is there because of this crossover between two
Right.
minds which think in a similar fashion, I think it can go deeper than just somebody giving a speech. Like that's my
Hmm.
perspective. And you may have probably found something very similar, unless of course your speech has been pre-written and you've like put in a lot of thought in that, and it's a paper that you're reading out or something of that sort, or an idea that you've churned over a long time.
Hmm.
But when it comes to extempore dialogue, I think like this is the epitome of it. Like maybe that's just my biased perspective.
No,
This is an
that's
opinion,
right.
not a
I'm
fact.
thinking of it as mountain climbing, you know.
Hmm.
Suppose you have to climb a mountain yourself, you're alone. You will move one step in a unit time.
Hmm.
But suppose there are two people, they can help each other climb a little bit higher and a little bit higher, and that's how the whole process can be done faster.
Beautiful analogy.
So that's a good thing.
I really like that one. Nice correlationships there. So again, so what we want to maybe have as a closing topic is so why are we doing this Samvada? So the first thing is that we are not pushing any isms, right?
Hmm.
It's an exploration of the truth. It's an exchange of ideas. We are here to enrich ourselves, and in the process of us getting enriched, the audience has a peek into our thinking process. So
Hmm.
not only is the audience looking into the facts that we are presenting, because I think the facts we are presenting are not so many. Like even in this
Hmm.
thing that we are speaking right now, it's not so much fact based as process based. We are
Right.
showing how to do the thinking as opposed to like giving out the product of that thinking.
Hmm.
And so that's one thing. Second is we are obviously not ideologically possessed. Like
Hmm.
we come from a paksha that what is that which makes the maximum sense at this given point in time. And that is what we are trying to arrive at. So there is no agenda that we are pushing onto each other. That makes it very fruitful. This is something that we spoke about during our very first conversation. I think phone conversation, not any
Yeah.
recording. The Goswami effect.
Mm-hmm.
So again, like when you have like 10 people, just voicing over each other, like we don't have that problem. It's again like two people being very open and articulate with each other, and it's a very rewarding experience. Um, and I think we do bring out the best in each other, and maybe the audience, it would be helpful for them to know like how we actually started this endeavor, and how we got connected. So uh, Vidulika might be embarrassed here, but doesn't matter. So she made this. I hadn't ever spoken to you before. Maybe we've like interacted through likes or something on post. I don't know, but this was our like first time I ever actually I commented on your post. You wrote something about aesthetics and body shaming related to that, and you mentioned that okay, fine, like we're not here to really hate on somebody for their body image or whatever, but there are certain objective standards and ideals of beauty, and this is rooted in very factual basis, and you have certain ratios. You have the Fibonacci, the golden ratio, which determines what an ideal beautiful structure looks like. And so these are like objective facts that nature has presented to us. We've not imposed it upon nature. It's natural. And so if there's a human body which is like, out of proportion or whatever, it is not very natural because it's bad for the health, and that goes against nature. And so, you said something to that effect. And so, again, this whole thing about no coincidences, but I'm like, here's somebody who's got an engineering background, but very much like me, she's like all into these ideals of aesthetics and beauty, and she's thinking from different perspectives. There's a lot that's going on in her mind, and what I found the most impressive is that you don't look upon subjects as individual silos, like in containers. All the boxes are opened up, and this is something we actually spoke about today, right? Itself earlier on, that what we end up doing is that first we have at some point in our life we have created the containers, but then we've opened up all these containers and we see how they all relate to each other, and it's kind of like the spider web thingy, and it's very beautiful how one can connect one topic to the other. And so that is something that we are trying to establish through the process of Samvadah as well, that how do we bring together disparate topics that not just others but we ourselves may not have thought relate to each other, and the process of discussion they come out. So if you have any thoughts on that.
No, as such closing remarks. Just I'd like to say that
No, you have one more
people
remark.
should.
You should make one more remark.
Okay,
You spoke about events versus processes, and we were supposed to embed the way we are thinking.
okay. Events versus processes thing. I don't know where does it fit here.
No, it fits because that's what we are trying to do. We are like process oriented in our conversations.
Ha. Okay, so again for the audience, as we have already discussed it, we were discussing that how some people think in terms of events. Whenever they are doing something, they think it like, okay, suppose we have to do a conversation. Maybe I have to invite someone for an event. A person may think like, okay, we have to send them a mail. Who is going to send them a mail? At what time? Things like that. While me, or maybe Prashantji as well, means not maybe, he as well. Both of us may think in a direction such as, we have to mail this person something. What should be the contents of mail and what we should convey? We will be more concerned about the process thing, and some people will be more concerned about the event thing. So the people who are into the project management, there are two kinds of processes to do something. One is called CPM, which is critical path method, where we again talk about events. Like we make a series of events and we go through it, that this event will be done, after that this will be done. There's a certain process. This particular process is carried out when the events are defined. While on the other hand, there's another method called as PERT. In that, we define the processes, and we define that okay, this process will be done, and when this is done, for example, if I'm doing a research, then I'll have to do a literature study. After that, I can go on to methodology. I cannot define what I'm going to put into the methodology, but only after I have done a certain process, I'll reach up to the next. So that is done mostly in research fields. So those are two kinds, and we are putting it in here because it actually gets applied everywhere. So since you know, need more people to manage events, we naturally, means we think so that we naturally have more people in the world who think in terms of events, while a lesser number of people who think in terms of processes. And I think that's the precise reason why we came into this Samvadah thing, right?
Yes, yes.
Because we were thinking in similar ways, first thing. Second, we were thinking in terms of processes, and we the people who generally thinks in terms of processes are always uh, tended towards making the process better,
Mhm.
making the not the yes, including the individual process and the whole system better, because that's how they have been processing it. And that's why the Samvada thing came out, because we wanted to make this better, the conversations better, and we wanted to uh, learn how to go above this events thing and the points thing, and how to relate it more. And that's the precise reason why you will see so many interconnected discussions in Samvada. For example, if there's a talk, it will be defined to a certain, there will be certain walls and boxes, and a person will be talking among it. While in Samvada, we can discuss anything. It can be from the definition of circles to debating about socialism, everything can be put in. And that's the strength of this particular event, right?
Yes. And I'd also like to say that what Viduleka is offering here is very unique because she has a tremendous capacity to excavate to the depth of a given topic and take it down to the very core. And that is something I greatly admire. And
Thank
it's
you.
something it's something that we as conversationalists are going to be constantly enriched by. So, I'd also like to, it would be incomplete not to mention that because you mentioned our thinking processes, we are abstract thinkers, like both of us. And for sometimes the audience may think that, okay, we are a bit scattered. Exactly, for, what could be perceived as a strength, some people may perceive it as a weakness as well, which is okay. These people are going all over the place. They're not staying only on one specific topic. And the reason for that is that the way we think, like the two of us, is you have, again, let's take the circle example we've spoken about. That if you have the surface of the circle, the circumference, on the circumference are all of these points. They are the objects, they are the events that you spoke about. But beneath the surface of that sphere is this area which could connect to multiple points. And so we are originating from there in our speech. And so the audience may not necessarily realize it, but we are having to actually, in some sense, translate our metaphors and images into very concrete words in order for us to communicate. And that's why we end up speaking in examples and analogies, because examples make a lot of sense to us. Whereas if it were just like dry, objective, event based facts, it would be less rewarding to us because it would be harder for us to do. And so, the audience is going to probably be exposed to a lot of metaphors, a lot of imagery is coming from us. And like that's just the form of communication that we are most comfortable with. So, and just one more thing that, one of the goals of Samvadah, to Vidulika's point also, is we don't just want to state facts that are out there, or, just regurgitate and vomit out like what's already available to people. We sincerely, and even if this might sound a little egotistical, we actually want to break the barriers of our current frontiers of knowledge. We want to expand forth into new territory. We want to come up with new correlations that people may never have thought about. And whether we succeed or not, we will find out. But I think based on the 5 conversations, this is the 5th one, I think we have made some progress in that direction. And as we continue on these dialogues, I think we'll keep pushing the frontiers ahead and ahead. So,
Yes, I'll put in one more point. Like, people may have so much of information and knowledge, but I think that until you have interrelated and correlated all of them and understood it completely, you don't really know how all of them can be applied. And thus there may be an argument that we are not like bringing into more objectified knowledge into this conversation. We are only speaking about what we already know and our opinions on it. But I think that matters because we are correlating and interrelating all those things. And that's why I see value in it.
Wonderful. And so even on that note, I would say since we want to focus on quality and not quantity, we may see one episode every couple of weeks or something. It may not be every single week, but so we'll stay on that. I think I'll close off with a Shanti mantra. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnaat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Shishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Namaha. Hari Om.